This episode of Fermented Adventure the Podcast is sponsored by Brewskits, handcrafted dog treats made from spent beer grains, oats, barley, and rye. No chemical preservatives, a great source of fiber, and packed with protein. Visit brewskits.com to see the full selection of treats for your dog and your cat. Receive 15% off, no minimum purchase on your first order by typing in lowercase FA 2024 at checkout. Cheers! Hello, ladies and gentlemen, craft spirit enthusiasts, and those interested in the intoxicating world of craft distilleries, cideries, meaderies, wineries, and the occasional foray into breweries. It's Rich Shane, and welcome to Fermented Adventure, the podcast, where we bring you the fascinating people that are making the mash, fermenting, distilling, bottling, pouring, and delivering to you some of the finest libations in the world. Before we get started, here are a few housekeeping items. Thank you for bringing the podcast into wherever you are and whatever you're doing. We truly are grateful that you have chosen to listen and make us part of your day. It would mean the world to us if you left a 5-star review. This helps us climb in the rankings, and it makes it easier for others to find us. Don't hesitate to leave us your comments as well. If the podcast didn't meet your expectations, tell us why. We're always striving to improve. You can find us at fermentedadventure.com. We are on Instagram and Facebook as Fermented Adventure. Email us at fermentedadventure@gmail.com. All right, FA Nation, let's meet our guest. He's Ted Dumbauld. I'm Rich Shane. This is Fermented Adventure, the podcast. Ted, welcome to the podcast.
And Rich, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on today, and I'm happy to be spending some time chatting with you here today.
I'm excited, and this is part of, for Dawn and I, our Fermented Adventure. We're driving up to Providence, Rhode Island, and as we do, we look on maps or we pre-plan, and we come across in our path Sono 1420, America's Maritime Distillery, and we say, you know what? Let's get off. We need to check this place out. We haven't heard of it, hadn't had any of your spirits yet. Came across Eugenia, and she was gracious and wonderful. And then we fell in love with your distillery and your spirits. And I said, I can't wait to speak to Ted and have him on the podcast. So Ted, how did Sono 1420 get started?
Well, that's a very good question. And it's a very long answer, but I'll keep it as short as possible. So I'm into my 5th or 6th career. I've been on this planet for quite a while now. Very varied background. I was at an engineering undergraduate degree. I've got an MBA. I was a nuclear submarine officer for 5 or 6 years. I worked on Wall Street for another 20 years or so. And then maybe for the last 5 or 6 years, I was heavily involved in the medical cannabis business, which I had no experience with. So I tried to educate myself as much as possible about that industry. And I observed a few things. Number one, that even though cannabis is becoming a much more developed market, it's still illegal at the federal level. And it's really difficult to socialize with cannabis. So we had a bunch of events, and there was a lot of alcohol being distributed and consumed, and cocktail parties and the like. But there was absolutely no alcoholic beverage brands advertising at these types of events. So I said, hey, there's a huge opportunity here potentially to build a brand at that intersection between cannabis and alcohol. And so that was the original concept, the original idea. And then the innovation that we brought to the space was, again, without getting into all the details, the hemp plant is the same plant as marijuana, it's cannabis sativa, but under legal terms, if it has less than 0.3% THC in it, it's considered to be hemp. Greater than that 0.3%, it's marijuana. And as a function of the 2018 Farm Bill, hemp was legalized for the first time in the United States in almost 90 years. And one of the products that the hemp farmers now make is hemp seed. And many people know hemp seed's got a very good health qualities to it. It's got the proper ratio of omega-6, omega-3 fatty acids and the like. But if you take a look at a grain of hemp seed, it looks like a marijuana seed, but it also kind of looks like a grain of rye. So I was at a conference at the University of Kentucky, and So learning about the hemp plant and the various uses of the products. So after a couple of days there, met some people. The conference was over. We went out for cocktails afterwards. And what do you do when you're in Kentucky? You drink bourbon, right? So I had this great new knowledge about the hemp plant and the hemp seed. I'm drinking bourbon. I said, wait a second, what happens if you take this hemp seed and put it in a whiskey mash? Maybe you'll have something unique and different and consistent with that concept of the collision course between alcohol and cannabis. I said, okay, I'm going to pursue this a little bit. So I came back from that trip to Kentucky, taught myself how to make whiskey in my basement using hemp seed in the mash bill. And here we are multiple years later. Now we've got a full-blown distillery where we make whiskeys using hemp seed in the mash bill. We're located, as you learned, as you're driving up 95, just a stone's throw away from the Long Island Sound. So we're really taking advantage of the terroir here in this maritime environment on the Connecticut shoreline. And we're making really, really great whiskeys. Plus, we've got some other products too. So in a nutshell, that's how I got from there to here.
There are so many ways I want to take this, so many questions popping around in my head. And I want to let you know, we had just had a guest on a company called Hempsels. We had a whole interview about hemp and hemp products. And then again, we get off 95 and we come to a distillery, yours, making spirits, making whiskey with hemp. And it's how it's how the worlds align, right? This is exactly the next steps that are supposed to happen. I go back to when you were in Kentucky and you're posing the question, did anybody have any experience, or was this something where you said, hey, hemp, why don't you add this to the mash bill? Was there at least any feedback that you got from any distillers or any people that you reached out to?
Well, so until 2016, where the 2016 Farm Bill was passed, which was a precursor to the 2018 Farm Bill, it was 100% illegal to grow even hemp here in the United States. So when I first started making my hemp-based whiskey in 2016, 2017. So at that point, I could not source hemp seed here in the United States. I had, in fact, had to go to Canada, which had a developed hemp seed program. And there's another story about the first time I tried to import 50 pounds of cannabis seeds, and I get a call from CBP one day saying, hey, looks like you're importing 50 pounds of marijuana seeds here. What's going on? I said, no. Trust me, they're hemp seeds. They've been made non-viable and all that kind of stuff. So at that point, there was not any ability to buy hemp seed here in the United States. So I try as I might, even to this day, I've only been able to identify one other company that happens to be in Kentucky that uses hemp seed in their mash bill. I'm not saying that they don't exist, but I've searched and I've looked and I've never tasted anybody else's whiskey. So because of the illegal nature of the hemp and cannabis plant for so many years, there was absolutely no market for hemp seed, and therefore no one that I knew at the time had developed any whiskeys using hemp seed. So it was purely based on trial and error on my part. I do have a chemistry background, so that lent itself very well to a lot of the experimentation that I did. Lots of learnings there. Don't recommend everybody go down that path. But one of the reasons that we started using hemp seed was from a marketing perspective. Anytime you're building a brand, how do you differentiate yourself from all the other hundreds or thousands of products out there? So one of the first things that we were able to talk about is how our whiskey is different, how the hemp seed adds to the flavor profile. We can get into that more later if you'd like. But after about 3 years in the barrel, we had a batch of whiskey that was so fabulous at barrel strength that I said I can't downproof it. We barrel our whiskey at 125 proof. And so it was so delicious. And I'm a big fan of high proof whiskey. It was so delicious. I said, I've got to enter this into the San Francisco World Spirits Competition. A lot of people know that's kind of like the granddaddy of all the spirits competitions. So it's very prestigious. So the very first whiskey was this single barrel, full proof bourbon. that won a double gold medal. So at that point, we said, okay, we're not only do we have a product that we can talk about and how it's different, but we also talk about it's really great whiskey also.
Brewskits, beer grain dog bones, brewskits. Your dog will go wild. Brewskits, beer grain dog bones, a healthy alternative for your pup.
Brewskits are all natural and made in the USA. Visit brewskit.com. That's BREWSCUID.com.
You're an inventor, you're an entrepreneur. The world of distilled spirits, I mean, the other thing that stood out for us, and one of the first things we saw was the way you package these ready to mix cocktails. Not ready to drink cocktails, but ready to mix cocktails in these individual bottles taken together, brought together. So you have all these ingredients that you open and pour into a glass. Unlike, with what you're talking about with hemp, I don't see too many other distilleries doing this either. And where did that idea come from?
Sure. So, I love the whiskey business. I love making whiskey. I love drinking whiskey. I love talking about whiskey and educating people on whiskey. However, from a business perspective, and, first and foremost, I'm a businessman. And, as much as I like doing this, I have a profit motive. One of the big advantages of setting up a whiskey distillery is that you make the whiskey today and then you wait 4 years until it's ready to drink. So from a business perspective, you need to have a lot of capital or a lot of patience or both, or additional innovation. So, we started right before COVID. COVID, changed the landscape for a lot of people and a lot of businesses. And one thing that COVID kind of helped accelerate was the success and popularity of ready-to-drink cocktails. Many restaurants started selling cocktails to go. Many states changed their laws to allow that to happen. Then you had the White Claws of the world come out. They were malt-based, ready-to-drink cocktails. And then High Noon, I think, was one of the first people to come out with a spirits-based cocktail. So we decided, rather than competing head-on with those major brands, what makes a really great cocktail is very fresh ingredients and your ability to mix them together in real time, shake them up, and then serve them right before you consume them. If you go into your favorite bar, that's what happens. You ask, let's say, for an espresso martini, and then your mixologist puts a shot of vodka, puts a shot of a coffee liqueur, and puts a shot of espresso in there, shakes it up, makes it really cold, pours it into your martini glass, get a nice foam on, puts two or three coffee beans on, you get the perfect pour. So we said, okay, how about if we take that concept and rather than being a Me Too ready to drink cocktail, let's do what we call a ready to mix cocktail. So as far as we know, no one else has ever done that. Again, another innovation on our part. And you're right, we have it comes packaged. We have 3 flavors, about to have 4. So let's just talk about the espresso martini. So it comes packaged as a single unit, but it has 3 50 ml nip or airline size bottles. And each of those 3 bottles has one of those separate ingredients. So the consumer can buy it at the store. They can buy it here at the distillery or whatever. They go home. And then when they want to have the perfect espresso martini, they're saying, I don't want to go to the bar. I don't have any espresso. What am I going to do? I've got a threesome, ready to mix espresso martini. So they take off the 3 caps. They pour it directly into a glass or pour it into a shaker. They shake it up, pour it into their martini glass. And then they've got the perfect espresso martini that is good, if not better, than what their favorite mixologist at the corner bar would have made for them.
I am such a fan of the way that you think things through. I almost want to have this Tim Ferriss conversation with you about what's your process to invent things and where do these ideas come from? Because, it sounds like you're very cerebral, but you're very purposeful in how you want your brand to be identified. And yes, you could make a whiskey, but you're making whiskey with hemp. Yes, you could put out a ready-to-drink cocktail, but from what Eugenia had communicated to us, this really controls that product better than something just in a can. The way that you've packaged this, and we'll put pictures up on our website so people can see what this looks like. I'm sorry, but where does that come from? Or I guess really where I want to dive with you, Ted, is what else is coming rattling around that mind of yours?
Well, I'll ask. There's two questions there. I'll answer the first one first. So I would say that we all know our limitations. I know what I'm good at and what I'm not so good at. So unlike, and I'm by no means am I trying to compare myself to Elon Musk, but you think about Elon Musk, he's got these brilliant ideas that are brand new concepts. Or same way with like a Steve Jobs, the iPhone. So what I do is more derivative in nature. So I didn't invent a whiskey, didn't invent bourbon. I didn't invent whiskey. I just said, okay, here's a product that people really like, and change to that long-standing product can I bring to the table that will make the product stand out and maybe make it better, hopefully make it better in the process. So, and then also one other characteristic of my career is observing changes in laws. So when you get a change in a law or a regulation, that creates an opportunity where before you couldn't grow hemp seed or you couldn't use hemp seed in products in the United States. But now 2018, they changed the law. Now you can do that. So by keeping an eye on those innovations in the world helps me decide, okay, what sort of innovation can I do that is derivative from other things, but in a new marketplace. So that's I guess that's where I'd say my innovation and creativity comes from. I'm not a groundbreaking thinker. I'm kind of more on the derivative side of things. So I joke to myself and to other people, I get a good new idea about every 3 to 5 years. I started the hemp-based whiskey. We started manufacturing in 2016, but didn't open my distillery in 2019. I came up with the threesomes about 2 or 3 years ago. So I guess, I'm almost ready for my next good idea, but I don't have it yet. So I'm afraid I can't break any news here for you today.
As a consumer of craft and a fan of craft distilleries, what you do and what you bring to our market makes this more thrilling to be out and enjoying your hard work and the labor of you and your staff, because it's not just the same old, same old. And there's a market for the same old, same old. But when you come across something that's just a little bit unique, a little bit different, and a little bit, as I said, it's purposeful in thought to what you do, it's very much appreciated by us, the consumer. And I'm just curious, you're in Connecticut, and what has been the growth for you within a state like Connecticut, where navigating, some of those rules, laws, and maybe some restrictions to grow a distillery?
Yeah. So, the first big challenge we had to overcome was the use of this part of the cannabis plant, in this case, the hemp plant. So with the change in the 2018 Farm Bill, cannabis was no longer a Schedule I drug or hemp version of cannabis, and therefore it was no longer controlled by the DEA. And my regulator, as you know, the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax Trade Bureau, or TTB for short, regulates all alcoholic beverages here in the United States, both from a formula perspective. Not everything needs a formula, but depending on what you're making, you might have to get formula approval. And then if you need a formula approval, you have to then get label approval. But regardless, every product, you have to get federal label approval before you bring the product to market. So my first challenge was convincing the TTB that what I was using to make my spirits was in fact legal. I had to send to them lab reports showing that in fact there was no THC in the hemp seed that I was using. And then there was a bunch of restrictions as to what I could and I could not put on the label. So normally, if I'm just making a standard whiskey or a standard ready to drink cocktail, you need to have a formula approval. You can get that depending on the workload at the TTB, in a week or two, and then another 2 weeks to get a label. So within a month, you could probably develop a new product or have the regulatory approvals to get a product into the marketplace. Well, with my first hemp-based whiskey, it took me probably 6 months after getting my permits to become a distiller to get that first product into the market because of all the hoops I had to jump through. So there's all these regulatory issues that as a distillery you have to abide by. And then another thing that we got challenged on, say a lot of people, I assume you've got a very educated audience, but a lot of people today still believe that bourbon has to be made in Kentucky, which is not the case. I mean, there's a half a dozen different requirements, one of which it's got to be made in the United States, but does not have to be made in Kentucky. So once we got over the hurdles that, we can call it bourbon, it's really bourbon. People said, well, you can make good bourbon in Connecticut, maybe Texas and Tennessee and of course, Kentucky. So we said, okay, how do we dispel that misperception that you can't make good whiskey, good bourbon, unless it's in Kentucky? And so we kind of took a page from the playbook of the Scotch whiskey. So, Scotch, I think I'm not a big Scotch drinker, so my knowledge of Scotch is a little bit limited, but I believe there's 5 different regions, the Highlands, the Lowlands, the Speyside and all that kind of stuff. And what their whiskey, how each of those regions distinguishes from one Scotch from the other is the location on the Scottish island and the terroir, or, where the whiskey's made and the environment in which it's aged will have a huge difference in the flavor of that whiskey. So we said, okay, what makes us different here in Connecticut versus Kentucky? Kentucky, if you talk about, why does Kentucky make good whiskey? Well, because they've got this limestone aquifer and they have really good water. I said, well, okay, duh, what's big deal? I could ship water here if I wanted to, but what we've got that they don't have and they're never going to have is having their distillery a block away from the Long Island Sound and this maritime environment. So we've really leaned into that. And as you said at the top of the interview, the name of our distillery is America's Maritime Distillery because we're right here in this maritime environment. And to extend that concept, we have a relationship with a company called Copp's Island Oyster. They're probably the largest shellfish operation here on the East Coast. Specifically, they farm oysters. And they've got a fleet of 30 different oyster boats that go out onto the Long Island Sound 6 days a week. So in this relationship with them, we put barrels of our whiskey onto their boats and we call them finished at sea because we'll typically age them for 2 or 3 years, the barrels here on the distillery for 2 or 3 years. Then we'll put them on the boat for a year or two. And at the end of that period of time, due to a variety of reasons, we get a completely different tasting whiskey that's, it tastes older than it is from an age perspective because you get a lot more sloshing around inside of the barrel, which helps age the whiskey. It's exposed to the briny sea air, so you get a really full mouthfeel, maybe a touch of saltiness, which really accentuates some of the other flavors of the caramels and the vanilla. So that's kind of what we've had to do is say, okay, what are our challenges? One of the challenges, you can't make good whiskey in Connecticut. So we flipped that around and we said, okay, au contraire, in fact, we can make even better whiskey here for the following reasons.
All right. I mean, every time you talk about something with Sono 1420, the story gets better. It really does. So I have a couple of expressions here of the whiskey: full-proof, rye, the single barrel, and the special reserve. Which one would you say, hey, Rich, I want you to try this first? Pardon the interruption. Thank you so much for listening to Fermented Adventure, the podcast. Could you do us a favor? Hit that follow button. It makes it easier for others to find us, and it helps us climb in the rankings. Take a screenshot of the podcast, post it, tag us, and let everyone know that you listen to the Fermented Adventure podcast. Now, back to our podcast.
Well, I'm gonna put a caveat on that.
Okay.
Normally, if someone says, which of my whiskeys should I drink if I'm only going to drink one whiskey, I would say absolutely the full proof whiskey is where you want to go, because the flavor is just unbelievably great. As I said, won a double gold medal at San Francisco World Spirits Competition. However, the caveat there is that it's 125, 126 proof. And so normally when you're sampling whiskey, you want to start with the lower proof and move up to the higher proof. Because if you start at the high proof stuff, it doesn't burn out your taste buds, but it definitely, if you drink something 126 proof and then you go down to an 84 proof, it's almost like you're drinking water. So when we do tastings, which we do have people come into our tasting room, we're open on Fridays and Saturdays for tours and tasting. So when people come in and they want to do a flight, I'll start with those 4 whiskeys or maybe one or 2 other ones mixed in for good measure. And we start with the Special Reserve, which is our more affordably priced whiskey. It's a blend of our whiskeys plus whiskeys that we source from other places. It won a gold medal at San Francisco last year. 84 proof. It's really good whiskey. It's probably better than what you would normally pay for the same price for like a Jack Daniels or a Woodford because it's crafty, but on the retail shelves, it's typically at $39. We use source whiskey, as I said, but at a minimum, we're also using 10% of our own whiskey. So we haven't gone there yet, but so using hemp seed in our mash bill does 2 main things. Number one, hemp seed by nature has a very nutty flavor, and a lot of whiskeys are described as having some nuttiness associated with them. And so our nuttiness comes exactly from the hemp seed. But number 2, and probably more importantly, is that hemp seed is actually an oil seed. So when we make our mash in our mash tun, we get about an inch or 2 of hemp seed oil floating on the top of the mash. And that all of that makes its way through the fermentation or distillation process. But enough of it does is that if you feel the distillate coming off of our still, usually comes off at like 160 proof. If you're making a bourbon, it'll evaporate really quickly. But our distillate, because it has some of that hemp seed oil in it, is much more slippery and it stays around longer on your fingers. So then when we put it in the barrel and we age it and then you sip it, that fullness, that oiliness comes through into your flavor profile, gives you a fuller mouthfeel, and you'll really notice that when you drink the single barrel and then the full proof. The one that you're drinking now just has 10%, so it's going to have a nominal amount of that hemp seed influence. The whiskeys that we source are really good whiskeys. It's a minimum of 2 years, but we use typically a blend of anywhere from 2 to 6 year old whiskeys combined with our own whiskey, and to give it it's an easy drinking whiskey, decent nose, decent palate, decent finish. For $40, like I said, it's going to be better than the mass produced whiskeys, but still very accessible.
All right, for $40, this is a steal, and I don't want to encourage you to raise your prices, and I don't want to get hate mail from those people in and around your distillery. But the first thing I get, the nose is, I'm going to use this and say it's very clean, from a standpoint that there seems to be a very consistent nose on this, and I'm sure as this opens up, there'll be some variations to that. But when I open this, I got a lot of cinnamon.
Okay.
And that from that standpoint, I think it's kind of transferred. I don't know what your mash bill on this or the other juices that you're bringing in, and you could tell me I'm wrong, but it seems like there's a high rye characteristic or following some of that is your personality.
Yeah. So our standard bourbon is 75% corn, which gives that sweet notes and the vanilla and the maple, 15% rye. So it's not super high, it's not 20 or 25%, but there's enough rye in there that you're going to get a lot of that pepper and spice that's more characteristic of a rye. And then the 10% hemp seed kind of rounds things out, adds a little bit of nuttiness, adds that fuller mouthfeel, and really works well with the other flavors of the corn and the rye.
It is sweet. I feel like I'm getting that amuse-bouche, that little appetizer, that little taste of what's to come from your other expressions. There's a creamy mouthfeel. There's this little bit of hint of like a licorice or something that comes in with that perspective that just kind of comes and goes away. It lingers, but you're left with some oakiness, and that's it. This is something that I could say, yeah, I'll make a cocktail with this, or I could just sip this. This could be my everyday sipper, and I feel like, hey, I'm driving the Rolls Royce, but I'm only paying for the Yugo. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's like I said, it's an easy sipper if you just want to drink it neat. Works really well in a cocktail, an old fashioned or whatever your favorite cocktail is. Good whiskey, and definitely a good alternative to the more well-known mass-produced brands.
That last sip gave me like this little cherry orange rind.
Okay.
So there's this is going to be fun to continue to work through, and on a nice lingering day, I can just kind of play with this and see what comes out. All right. What would you say next?
Let's go to a single barrel.
Okay.
So this is 100% of our whiskey. None of it's sourced. We've all made it here at our own distillery. We've aged it here in the distillery. It's as I said before, 75% corn, 15% rye, 10% hemp seed. It's been put in the barrel, laid down at 125 proof. So that's going to pull more of the tannins and some of the sugars out of the barrel. The barrels, we use a couple different coopers. Our favorite cooper that consistently gives me the best whiskey is Kelvin Cooperage out of Kentucky. So this is a Kelvin barrel, 53 gallons. It's been aged at least 4 to 4.5 years. We downproof it to 94 using filtered water here in the distillery. You're going to pick up a lot more nose on this compared to the 84 proof. You're going to obviously have a little bit more heat from the alcohol, but by no means is it going to be overwhelming. More maple. You tell me.
Well, if you ever watch your favorite movie and you can't wait for that part that you just love every time, that's my experience as to how I said, what is this distillery? What the heck are they doing? Because I've never had anything specifically like this. And the first thing I did on the nose, I picked up this root, this earthy, complex root to it that almost, to me, has characteristics of horseradish. And I loved it. I thought that was, again, I'm going to say unique to anything that I've ever enjoyed. And it's there. It's like I was waiting for that part of the movie, and it didn't disappoint me. It came back, and I said, I love that, because I think what that does is it gives way to a very sweet, candy-like note on the nose. So I think if you were to, let's say, drink like something acidic or sour and then try to drink something sweet, it's going to change the way you approach or way that approaches you. And I think that's what the nose does. It kind of clears you out so that your nose is ready or prepared for something different, and it's going to amplify or highlight that better.
Well, one thing, and you tell me, but for me to really enjoy a good whiskey, it's got to have a great nose. But then the palate has to match the nose. There's so many whiskeys out there that has a beautiful nose, but then there's no palate. Another one doesn't have a nose and has a great palate. So you have to have a good balance between those two. And then, of course, I'm always looking for a very long finish. And I do believe we succeed in most of our batches with those three characteristics.
Everything you said, I would agree with. And that's what I gravitate towards. You and I are, kindred spirits in a way that I like that long finish. I like just sitting there, maybe breathing in and out of my mouth when I'm not gabbing like this, but,
Yep.
Just allowing those oxygens to hit the tongue and everything to just linger and play. And I don't know what you're charging for this one, but I'm guessing it's still a very economical, very value-driven brand.
Yeah, so it's definitely more expensive. So it's on typically our suggested retail price is $75.99. So it's up there.
I thought you were going to say 95, 99.99 or something.
No, it makes for a really great gift. When we first launched, we did not have the special reserve, and people that don't know the whiskey, they're reluctant to pay $75 for a bottle. So by bringing the lower price point special reserve, it gives people an opportunity to taste the whiskey, start enjoying the brand, learning about the brand, and say, wait a second, hey, I had the special reserve. I see on the shelf the single barrel. Really enjoy the special reserve. It's a special gift or a special occasion. Let me grab for the special barrel. And we do a lot of tastings. Trying to convince buyers at stores or restaurants to bring our whiskey on. And, we always start them with this special reserve. I would say 80% of the time, once we taste them on the single barrel, they say, well, we got to bring the single barrel in too, because it's just too good not to have.
What is coming out here as we're talking is grain, grassy notes. I get some salinity to it. There's this wonderful... It almost, to me, has a char that I would expect in a Tennessee whiskey as a finish. I don't know if that's coming out of the level of char out of your barrels, but that's also there. And this is the one that won the double gold, right?
Actually, no. It's the same mash bill, but this won a gold medal. The one that won the double gold was the same mash bill, but at barrel strength, not at the 94 proof.
All right. Well, somebody messed up on the score sheet, because legitimately here, this is, as you say, all right, you can't make good bourbon or whiskey from Connecticut. And you've already pointed out that not only you're making phenomenal whiskey. Where are you sourcing your grains from right now? And you talked about terroir.
Yeah. So unlike the Midwest, I actually grew up in Ohio, so I'm very familiar with the cornfields of Ohio and Indiana and Iowa and the like. We don't have much agriculture here in Connecticut. The joke is that the Connecticut state flower is the rock, because there's just not. You try to plant a garden, and next thing you know, you've got a rock garden. So unfortunately, we don't have the ability to source grains from here, but we do have some really good vendors that provide us with high quality grains from the Midwest, typically. So we found that the mash bill and the barrels that we use are much create huge influence on the flavor profile. I've not experimented that much with different types of corns. I know actually I've been in touch with a vendor recently that's got some legacy grains that we might be bringing in, but that's not a big part of what we do. Is we just focus on making great whiskey and where we age it.
All right, which pour should we do next? The full proof or the rye?
We're gonna switch horses a little bit. We're gonna go to the rye because it's same proof. Actually, it's a 92 proof. It's a more standard rye. Now it's got 75% rye, so you're gonna have a lot more pepper and spice than you had with the bourbon. 15% corn to add a little sweetness and some of those subtle maple and vanilla notes, and then same 10% hemp seed. I'm more of a bourbon drinker, but I really like our rye. I think the nuttiness of the rye really complements the spiciness of the rye. So you tell me what you think.
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is so Pennsylvania, this is when you say you can't make bourbon out of Kentucky, well, you can't make rye out of Pennsylvania. And I know I'm upsetting those, Maryland and New York people, but Pennsylvania was the rye capital at one time and will be at some point. recognized that way. But this nose is over the top. And I remember, again, I'm coming back to my favorite movie, standing at the bar, and Dawn and Eugenia are talking, and I'm just doing this with the Glencairn. I'm just nosing this and enjoying the creaminess, the herbaceousness, the floral notes on this. Laura Fields, who's with the Fields Foundation, she's part of the Seed Spark project that is working to bring rose and rye back to Pennsylvania. I wish I had her to share one of these, because I think she'd really be happy with the rye. She'd be impressed with this rye as a fan that she is. I could just sit here and nose this. So we don't have that much time together on the podcast, and you'd probably get bored of watching me sniff Glencairn.
That's okay.
But this is wonderful. It's there. There's a minty, like a spearmint to this that comes out, even on the nose. And how this, again, going back to our experience, I'm like, wow, I had never had a distilled spirit with hemp. And I was so curious as to how that was going to play out. And every one of these is exceptional. People should be, do you ship to all 50 states? How can people get a hold of your whiskey?
So on our website, we do have the ability to do e-commerce. The states where we have distribution are Connecticut, New York, Rhode Island, Maryland, DC, and Delaware. So each of those states, our product is available from liquor stores and bars and restaurants. Unfortunately, and you're probably aware, there's lots of regulations and restrictions against shipping spirits across state lines, but we do have a relationship with a internet retailer distributor that has the capability to ship to 30 different states. So you can go onto our website. There's a little app there that you can check, put your zip code in, and you can see if we can ship to you. So unfortunately, we can't ship everywhere just yet, but we are adding states on a bit by bit basis.
Sweet, spicy, minty, grainy, creamy. I'm sorry, this is a showstopper as far as, it really is. So thank you. These are one of those things we're going to start, at least the idea is I want to pick a rye, Fred Minnick has his Ascot Awards, right. We just want to do a rye award or something.
That's a good idea.
Ted, high praise. And
thank you.
To what you're really working hard, you and your staff. I mean, we were there for bottling day for this threesome thing.
Right.
And everybody's working hard. What I got from our experience is everybody loves being a part of your brand. Everybody loves being a part of the distillery. So, I mean, that's what came across to us.
Yeah, we have a great staff, and I think that embodies itself in the end product. So I'm going to ask you to do one favor before you go to the full proof.
Yes.
Just go back to the single barrel.
Okay.
Just so you can quote unquote cleanse your palate, get it back to the bourbon. So not that we don't want you to forget about the rye, but I really want you to have a real good comparison between the single barrel 94 proof versus the single barrel strength. So
what actually came off the nose, again, because as you talk about, all right, I got something higher in my nose or a little bit there. There's a little bit more of a chocolatey nose that came through there as far as the spiciness. And by the way, you're my new favorite person, because anybody that tells me to cleanse my palate with more whiskey, kudos to you.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's not the normal way it's done, but we like to do things differently here. Okay. So now, now we're at the full proof, same mash bill as our standard bourbon, 75 corn, 15% rye, 10% hemp seed. As I said before, it's enters the barrel at 125 proof, depending on angel share and some other factors. It'll typically be bottled anywhere from 124 to 126, 127. I've already spoiled the surprise by letting you know what the proof is. But what I like to normally do is when I'm tasting people on this is not tell them what the proof is and have them guess, because almost everybody will say, yeah, it's got a little more heat, but, maybe 110, 115. So at 126, it's pretty stout. There aren't that many, I've seen some in the 130s and low 130s. But 126 is, still going to have a lot of heat. So normally when I ask people to taste this whiskey, I said, the first sip, just don't be overly judgmental the first sip, because you're going to get a lot of heat. And then, as that finish kind of fades away, then go back and get a real good nose of the whiskey. Then your next 2 or 3 sips are going to be much, much different. And then I typically find, and I don't want to influence your mind too much, but after about 3 or 4 minutes, after having my first sip, the nose is just evolves to something, and this is without even putting any water to open it up. To me, many times the nose just smells like pure vanilla or pure maple. So I'll let you do your thing now.
What I get initially is it's a very fruity nose, cherry. There's oakiness to it, and almost a nuttiness, like a peanuttiness on the nose. What you had said, if you would have had asked me and I didn't know you were going to ask the question, this does not nose at 120 plus proof. It doesn't. In fact, you said 110, 115. I might have said it's a little bit lower than that had I been, tested upon at your bar for a tasting. So that's one of those wonderful things. I think that what you realize is, all right, it's not going to blow out my olfactories if I just sit here and nose this, which is a wonderful way to treat this whiskey. Oh, that is so fruity. And then, all right, here comes like that oaky, peppery. I feel like I'm doing an episode of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory when I'm utilizing that everlasting gobstopper, because I feel like there's that vanilla in the nose. And it happened pretty quickly. And a lot of that was so cool that a lot of what I had nosing before just went away to this candy-like sweet vanilla nose. And there's that peanut that still shows up. And that must be the hemp, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, absolutely right.
Again, the mouthfeel is not 120 plus 125, right. 126. It's not there.
Yeah, but we agree.
I would say, from the first place we went to with a cocktail, because I'm doing an everyday sipper, to even, there aren't a lot of higher end, proofs that I just would rather sip them than make a cocktail. But this is definitely something that's going to stand up in a cocktail, and just add a little, if I added an Amaro to this or something bitter in complexity, I'm wondering how that's going to draw out some other flavors of the whiskey.
Yeah, I tend to, when I drink the full proof, I just drink it neat. I just really enjoy it that way. The other two, I'll maybe put it on ice or put it in an old fashioned or something like that. But this whiskey is just too spectacular. And it's, it's going to be more expensive, but, compared to some of the other ones out there, it comes in at $129.99.
What I find is, geographically, you're just north of New York, and you should have people flocking to your distillery. I mean, do what we did, make a right turn off of 95 and just discover what your area, what this part of Connecticut has to offer. You will be as impressed, and, you'll be converted to a fan like we have been. All we're asking now is you put a satellite distillery in Pennsylvania so we don't have to go that far. Now, I would be remiss, Ted, if I didn't talk about this Blaze whiskey.
Yep. So, again, a bit of an innovation going back to COVID days. We're always watching the market and see where trends are going. And you can't help but see how successful from a sales perspective Fireball is, but from a taste perspective, about the only thing you can do there is take a shot of it. And I think the majority of Fireball sales comes from the little 50 ml nip, so indicative that people are doing shots of it. but we observed that the flavored whiskey category was really expanding. It creates an opportunity for the whiskey novice or bourbon novice to have an entree into the market without having to go straight to a single barrel or something like that. So we said, okay, there's room in the marketplace for a premium or super premium cinnamon bourbon. Jack Fire was super popular, but during COVID, that's one of the reasons we decided to make this. Is it became in very short supply, so none of the bars or restaurants around here could keep it in stock. So we said, okay, it's still not very good whiskey. It tastes more like flavored vodka. So we said, okay, if we use a base of real bourbon and consistent with my need to have a good nose to match the palate, I wanted to have a good cinnamon nose that also had a cinnamon flavor. Well, unfortunately, at least in my experience, I could not find a single type of cinnamon that had those two great characteristics. So, for example, Vietnamese or Saigon cinnamon has that really traditional cinnamon flavor that, you have ground cinnamon to put on your oatmeal or whatever. So it's got a really great flavor. But if you smell the cinnamon, don't pick up much of a nose. On the other hand, an Indonesian cassia bark has this unbelievably pungent, beautiful cinnamon nose that you think of when you think of cinnamon, but the flavors just kind of falls flat. So we messed around with different cinnamons, and then we came up with a blend of the cassia bark to give us that really great nose, the Vietnamese cinnamon to give us a really great palate. We sourced really good straight bourbon, added a touch of sweetness. And so now what you have in your glass is what we call blaze bourbon. It's a cinnamon infused bourbon using real bourbon, using real two types of cinnamon, and then pure cane sugar to give it a touch of sweetness. So I was at one of our customers up in Rhode Island just a couple days ago, and they have on their menu a Blaze Old Fashioned, where they use Blaze, they use a little bit of sweet vermouth, and then they use black walnut bitters, and it's a fabulous cocktail. So it's super easy drinking right on the rocks. We've gotten into some higher end bars and restaurants that refuse to carry Fireball, but people come in, I want to they're partying, I want a shot of Fireball. They say, well, we got something better. We'll give them our Blaze bourbon, and they're super happy.
Anytime we'll go into a distillery, they may have a cinnamon whiskey or even a cinnamon moonshine, which is somewhat popular. And I have not had this experience where I have with your Blaze versus some of the other products. It just tastes like a flavorized cinnamon. It reminds me of when I was in high school and we used to go around selling these toothpicks dipped in cinnamon oil. And right. That's all it was. And to your description, I get such a wonderful cinnamon, the powder, the cinnamon bark of that, as it will. So I'm enjoying the aroma, the aromatics of cinnamon. And on the flavor, I'm not getting burned out on just cinnamon heat. I'm not getting overwhelmed by just sugar because it's over sugarized. It's right. A nice balance. And I can see why somebody would make some sort of a cocktail out of this, or some sort of a component that they would add to a cocktail. It's just a wonderful product. I mean, look, anything that comes out of the mind of Ted right now, I'm a big fan. If there's a hedge fund that we can invest in just in your mind, I'm right there for it. But this is everything, this has exceeded my, gladly to be able to sit down with you. What's resting in some of those barrels at Sono 1420 that you have maybe some releases coming up people can expect?
Yeah, we do some distillery select releases on occasion. This time of year, we like to do a double barrel maple finish. So we'll empty a barrel of our bourbon, We'll put maple syrup in there for a year or so. We harvest the maple syrup. It tastes really good on pancakes. It's got a little bit of a bourbon flavor, and then we put bourbon back into that barrel. And so if you're a fan of the little sweetness and a little more more indigenous mapleness, that bourbon is very, very popular. And as I said, we've got I think 8 barrels of whiskey being finished at sea right now. Some were put on early last year, so they're probably getting very close to being harvestable. So we'll be going sampling them here as the weather gets a little bit nicer. So I think we did a pretty good tour virtually anyways of our various products and our innovation. And as I said, I get a good idea every a few years, so there might be another good one coming around pretty soon.
Ted, is there anything we haven't talked about on the podcast today? Anything you want the listeners to know more about you or more about Sono 1420, America's Maritime Distillery?
No, I just encourage people like you, if you're driving up I-95, if you know this part of the country, 95 is the main thoroughfare that goes all the way from Florida all the way up to Maine. And literally, once you get into Fairfield County or to the Norwalk area, we're about 5 minutes off of the interstate. So I encourage you, if you're driving to and fro up 95, and there's typically a lot of traffic, and so you want to take a break from the traffic, take a quick right, and you'll be at the distillery, and tell them that Rich sent you, and we'll make sure that they have a great experience here.
Yeah, I would highly encourage people to do this. It's a good stop. By the way, we didn't spend a lot of time in Norwalk, but it looks like there's some great restaurants, some great shopping. You're front and center. Those people coming out of Long Island, people coming out of New York, people in Connecticut, just looking to see what you're doing. You're such a gem for the community. So look, anytime you get another idea, I can't wait. But I think, look, as a consumer, I'm so grateful for this idea. What you're doing, honestly, what you're doing to promote the hemp community, because that's also a value. And being able to partner with some farmers that are now being able to create a livelihood beyond just, maybe clothing or some different things. It's great. Ted, thanks so much for being a friend of Fermented Adventure. We can't wait to try more of your expressions, see what you're doing down the road, and just grateful for your time today.
Well, Rich, thank you very much. I appreciate your time and the kind words that you had, and it seems like you're a big fan of our whiskey, so we'll make sure that you never run dry.
Thanks, Ted.
Okay, bye now.